Thank you everyone for joining us for the second webinar, although it's the first segment where we really take a deep dive. Today we're focusing on competitors, pricing, and packaging. So this is all part of our ad sales webinar. There's kind of 12 segments to the ad sales piece, but we crunch it in to 8 different webinars, and we're doing those almost once weekly. We did one last week. We're doing one today. We're taking a little break for a few weeks. I have a conference, a few other items to attend to, and then it's almost weekly after that. So this is the second webinar, obviously focusing on our competition. So who is it that we're competing with for advertiser spend? And then how we price and package. So this is probably one of the most common questions we get, especially from new publishers, or even some publishers who've been established for a long time or just looking for a different way to do it. How do we put together some things, some packages that our advertisers can be interested in, and also how do we price them? And we have a different philosophy, and I think it's been a very useful philosophy for our customers. So very quickly, Broadstreet, a little bit about this webinar series. This is not intended to be a product pitch. I say this every webinar series, but some companies, they'll get you on a webinar and they will, it'll be some high level stuff, and then they'll kind of do a product pitch. That's not what is intended here. This is all about helping our customers be successful. So Broadstreet, founded in 2012, commitment to our clients' prosperity. And our vision as a company is to be the best possible platform for local digital advertising sales. If there is conversation about local ad sales, we want Broadstreet to be a part of that conversation. And again, this is the revised 2020 version of that 8-part series we did last year. We have updated content. We have some new guests, which we'll be announcing. So stay tuned for that. So today, all about the competition, packaging, and pricing, basically knocking off these first 2 blocks. After that, methodology, and client types, and then getting the meeting, those, and the proposal, those are all their own separate webinars. But today, like the competition, packaging, and pricing, when we think about ad sales, this isn't necessarily, this isn't the part we really think about, right? We're usually thinking about reaching out to people and trying to get meetings and going to those meetings and creating proposals. Thinking about your competition and your packaging and your pricing, this is that part where you stop and think. So like I said last week, sometimes we go slow to move fast. This is where we're really saying, like, hey, before we run into or run down this path, let's take a look at the map. Let's see where we're going, where we want to go, where we want to end up. Because by the time we hit that methodology piece in a couple of weeks, and where we really get into, we get in some good sales habits and methodical approach to ad sales, having planned things out ahead of time is going to be a big help to us. So the next webinars. So if you didn't notice, we didn't really send out a reminder for this webinar. So because we're doing them every week, it would be crazy to send out, an announcement for the webinar and then a little reminder like we did last year. So if you'd like to sign up for future webinars, we already had a bunch of people sign up for all 8 of them. Go to broadstreetads.com/webinars. We do have limited capacity. So just like try to get in there. We can increase the capacity later on, but it's a big jump from our current capacity. So we want to do it. And we could tell ahead of time if we're over that capacity, but just want to make sure that people are registered ahead of time so we know if and when we should do that. So the webinars, broadstreetads.com, that webinar that'll list out all the webinars, all the topics, all of that. And as always, 10 advantages. This nicely ties into today's webinar content. What are your advantages as a niche publisher? You would definitely have some. It's easy to look at Facebook and Google and think that they have all of the power and all of the leverage in this ad sales thing, but you do have some sincere advantages. I'll talk about some of those today. So that's at broadstreetads.com/10-advantages. It's almost impossible to miss because we promote it so much. In fact, if you visit our website, there's a good chance you'll see 10 advantages promotions around the web, because we do some retargeting as well. So today, this is what we're going to talk about. We, as always, have Annette Batson, also our sales rep from Annette, joining us. So Annette is here to always lend her expertise on different questions that come up. Last webinar, we tried something different. We said, save your questions, or let's only discuss things in between slides. I decided that we do kind of like it. We like it when it's a little more interactive. So maybe we should just be a little more relaxed about it. I think the conversation, and some people agreed with this, is sometimes that's the best thing about the web. I mean, the content's really good too, but the conversation's really good as well. It's like that little side chatter that goes on in the chat. So if you have any questions, any comments you want to make, there's that Zoom webinar chat that you'll see in your Zoom sidebar. If you click on the little chat icon, you'll see a conversation taking place there. So we'll stop and address those every now and then. This webinar last year, this particular one ran a little long last time, so I'm being very mindful of that. So I want to make sure I did trim the content down, but I made sure that it was a little bit more potent and a little more concise. So that is on my mind. I do want to make sure we get within the 45-minute mark. We tried that last week. We'll see if we can do it this week. So today, what are we going to discuss? We're going to talk about the competition. Not just Facebook, Google, although that I do spend a lot of time talking about them, our legacy competition, other more niche competitors. And then we'll talk about pricing and packaging for the achievement of sales targets, sustainability, meaning let's keep this thing up and running. And all right, let's keep this thing up and running. What are those targets we need to hit? And also talk about value for advertisers. There are a few different things that are going to we're going to need to think about when we talk about pricing and packaging. So when people are starting up and they say like, well, I don't even know what to charge. I mean, this is what my competitors are charging. This is what I want to charge, or I don't know if anyone's we'll talk about all of that. Then we'll talk about media kits very briefly. We probably devoted a little too much time to this last year. We're going to cut some of that out. We'll just link to some of our favorite media kits. And then discuss proposals very briefly. So the competition. Who has the clients or the types of clients that we want, and what are they offering? So we really need to think about this. Before we go out trying to sell something, we want to know if someone else is selling the same thing, if our thing is better, if our thing is worse, right? It doesn't make sense to just go out there and maybe even worse, do what everyone else is doing. We definitely want to avoid that. So I want to think about how can we be better? How can we differentiate? But first, we really want to think about what are our competitors' strengths and weaknesses. So for our competitors, Facebook and Google. 10 Advantages really goes into depth on Facebook and Google. It goes into the concept of scale, which we'll discuss briefly on the next slide, but really their strengths and their weaknesses. So it's it's a very thoughtful 4 to 5 pages on Facebook and Google. But we also have our legacy news media, or maybe I think for most of us, probably the shell of what they once were. We probably have some maybe like corporate or conglomerate owned local competitor that really isn't what it used to be, but they still are competitors, right? And we in the New Jersey area or the tri-state area, we have plenty of those. Bloggers, networks, Yelps, right? These are other competitors, kind of like, even if we have a hyperlocal and we've been like really well known in town, sometimes we get someone who pops up who's even a more niche competitor, right? Someone who just focuses on the food scene or just focuses on the nightlife. We have those types of competitors, and then we also have Yelps, our patches, the different corporate backed types that pop up. So what this really comes down to is that the advertising budget globally hasn't really gone away. There will always be a need for advertising. The problem is there are more people than ever fighting for that same budget. So if you want a piece of that action, right? If you want a piece of that advertising spend, we need to think creatively. What are we going to do to be different? But what are we going to do to also be more valuable to our end client? And there are a couple different ways to look at that value piece. Let's talk about Facebook and Google. When we talk about the decimation of advertising budgets, right? Normally we just think about like, whoa, they're so big. Facebook has 3 billion users. They have enormous scale, right? They do have a lot of people. And they also have precise targeting. So they know based on users' likes, that little like button, Facebook tracks that and uses as part of their marketing. Okay, you like this band, that means you must like rock music or reggae music, whatever it is that you liked, right? They infer interests about you. And then when advertisers upload their, they also know where you're located, all that kind of stuff. When advertisers upload a campaign, they can go ahead and set the criteria. And because everyone's on Facebook, that advertising can very effectively target that campaign to whoever it is they want to target. So they have enormous scale. And because of that, with their precise targeting, they can, reach a lot of people in a lot of different ways. Same thing with Google. People literally tell Google what it is that they're searching for. If if your dishwasher goes and you say, okay, I need appliance repair in my area. So you Google it, you're like, dishwasher repair near me. You're basically telling Google, hey, I'm looking for a dishwasher repair person. And now somebody can basically run a campaign, not only in Google search engine marketing, but maybe target people looking for that across the internet, right? So now we know the user's intent. So Facebook is really good at establishing interest, your actual likes, dislikes, all that kind of stuff. And then there's also intent. And a lot of times they're typically less expensive. So at this point, you might be thinking, like, wow, how do we even compete with that? Well, it turns out there are a few different ways you can compete. One is that there's no representative or human interaction at Facebook. Now, you might think this is like, okay, well, that's like, no, that's actually a very big deal, because anybody who has tried to run a campaign, and we've done this at Broadstreet, run a campaign using their search engine marketing tools, AdWords, and the different tools there. It's actually not that straightforward to run an effective campaign. It's almost like you have to hire someone to do that for you. And that's where some local agencies come in. Same thing with Facebook. Like, you can run a Facebook campaign, but if you've done it a few times, you start to wonder like whether you're really getting the traction or the results that you're really looking forward. And Facebook and Google, because they're so self-service, right? They're cheaper and you get better targeting, but it does kind of leave the user wondering as to whether they are actually getting results, and there's no one assuring them or guiding them toward their results, right? And that's another thing. Facebook and Google can't really give you guidance toward those results. They can take your budget and make it disappear, right? But they can't guide you and say, hey, these are the best keywords to target. Hey, these are the best targeting parameters you should set on Facebook. There's no one telling you that. And it's like, you need that expertise. And alongside that, there's no transparency in the results you do get. Okay, so Broadstreet boosts a post to its page followers and their friends, right? We target it specifically to people in the US. And what happens? We get likes from people who are outside of the US. We get these weird accounts that are overseas liking our content. I have a general feeling we don't have that many fans overseas, right? But this is where most of our likes are coming in. How did it happen, even though I did that targeting, right? So we're not getting much transparency, and we have no guidance into how we can prevent this from happening again. Unable to differentiate products. So everything that you're going to run on Facebook, for example, is a Facebook newsfeed ad, right? So it's the same thing. It's the same trick over and over. You run it in the newsfeed, it runs on the sidebar, it runs on Instagram. It pretty much all looks the same. So there's no clear premium buy. There's no way, if I went to Facebook and I had $1 million advertising budget, and I said, hey, Facebook, listen, I want everyone to know that Broadstreet is the best possible ad manager that can be used at the local level. I want to allocate $1 million to this campaign. There's nothing they can actually do other than give me more newsfeed ads. There's no clear premium buy for an advertiser who wants to establish themselves as a clear leader. And there are many of these types of advertisers. And they also can't demonstrate value. Like, if I do have that $1 million budget, let's just say I go on Facebook, I type 1000000. They can't tell me where that ad's even going to appear, who's going to see it. I don't know if I'm ever going to see it. There are some serious transparency issues with Facebook and Google. So these are their weaknesses. And obviously, like, we can't really beat them on their strengths. And there are different companies or different publishers who try to do targeting or collect data on their users. It's like, I don't even know if I'd really want to fight on that front. Let's focus on their weaknesses and see how we can differentiate here. Legacy newspapers, they have an established brand. This newspaper's been around for 100 years. They have some local personnel, so they can go in, meet with the advertiser. They can do that guidance, kind of. And they have a wider coverage area, or they do have a wide coverage area. Usually they're covering, not just a single town, maybe a few different towns, maybe a county, section of the state. So they have some strengths there, but their weaknesses is that, number one, and this is pretty evident, especially given the news over the last few years, they have high overhead. They have overhead that was built, or infrastructure that was built on income they don't really have anymore. There are a lot of layoffs going on in the news industry, but that's because they're not making the money now that there's so much competition, they're not really making the money that they need to support the infrastructure that they built up based on the income that they had in the past, right? So they have so much overhead that, our upstart customers have nothing like that. they're large enough to not be able to effectively service small customers. So the types of customers that Broadstreet's hyperlocal customers especially tend to target are the types that those local legacy newspapers can't even entertain the idea of working with. They say, okay, look, we can't work with anybody who has less than, a $500 a month budget. Well, that leaves a lot of room for, Broadstreet's, especially our news publishers, right? So there's a point where they say, hey, we can't even entertain something like that because by the time the campaign's, over with, we either broke even or we lost money on this campaign. There has to be a certain minimum spend for small customers so we can keep our highly paid editors and sales staff and executives on board and keep the lights on in this big office we have. They have high attrition rates among sales reps. So basically, sales rep meets with an advertiser. A year later, it's a different sales rep. Usually no transparency whatsoever on campaign performance. They probably use Google Ad Manager. They take the numbers, they dump them off at the end of the campaign in the advertiser's lap, which you like to renew. It's all about sales, not about advocacy, right? They're probably not advocating for the success of their client like our customers do. Broadstreet's customers think differently, and we're going to talk about that later on. And they also have established processes. So they're slower moving. They don't have the agility or the ability to think differently, turn on a dime, offer anything new, right? They have established processes. These are our packages. We've talked to some big established news brands in the past to say, hey, we're reconsidering. This is in May of 2019. Hey, we're reconsidering reworking our media kit for maybe 2020 or 2021. It's like, what are you talking about? Our customers can work something new into their media kit today if they want to. You have to be agile. So if their advertiser wants something different, they can't get it. If they want to change something in the middle of the campaign, they can't do it. They have all this needless inflexibility. So there are a lot of issues with legacy newspapers. Now let's talk about the opportunities for our niche publishers. So Broadstreet, we service hyperlocals, which we tend to talk about a lot during the webinars, but these lessons are the same between the different segments of publishers. Hyperlocals, city and regional magazines, industry publishers, radio broadcasters. These are the type of customers that we work with because they all have the same model. They all qualify as niche. Karen, highly paid newspaper people. I would say at some point, especially when you're getting to editor staff, the executive staff, salaries, benefits, all that kind of stuff, it adds up. Generally, some overhead that our customers don't. Our customers, many of them don't have. Lauren, just very quickly, will past webinars be available to view online if we can't make the next one? We're going to package them all up at the end of it. We're going to have them produced, and we'll put those online. Okay, so opportunities for niche. So ads are naturally relevant and targeted. So that's obvious. So if you run a hyperlocal, or we have one of our customers, I think, is Scaffolding Magazine, right? Scaffolding that goes on the outside. This is so beautifully niche. I love it. And you have the scaffolding that goes on the outside of a building, right? There's a magazine dedicated to that. You know that the potency of the readership, I mean, it is so targeted. It is almost impossible to target someone like that on Google or Facebook. So many of them have naturally relevant and targeted audiences. It's also easier for them to differentiate and innovate. So kind of like, okay, I want to offer a new ad format, put it in my media kit, boom, I can get that done. It's usually a smaller team, smaller organization that can do that and be a little more nimble. Personal guidance and advocating for your client, right? So instead of just thinking, and it's so easy, especially when we talk about our sales goals in the next slides and also next week or methodology, it's so easy to get in the mindset. It's like, okay, I have to hit my numbers. I have to hit the numbers. But we really want to remember that we're only going to hit those numbers if we can successfully advocate for our customer, right? We take their needs, the things that they said they want to do or they want to achieve. Like, hey, nobody knows about me. I'm off on this side street and nobody knows about me. How do we get people to know about them? That's that thing. You take their problem, you make it your problem. You advocate for them. So that's what we want. That's the approach we want to take in ad sales, and that's something that they will not get. They will not get someone in their corner of the ring. You also have the ability to be multi-touch, display, sponsor content, newsletter, social media, lots of different options apart from display advertising. We tend to talk about that a lot, but there are a lot of different ways to advocate for your customer and help run a successful campaign. You can be flexible. You can offer them reporting. You can offer them transparency in that reporting. And usually for our niche publishers, their click-through rates are really high. The more niche they are, the more relevant the ads are. And generally their click-through rate is way beyond the internet average of 0.06%. The weaknesses are that you can be a little more expensive, and it depends on, who that advertiser has worked with in the past. Maybe your comparable CPM is higher. Maybe it's not, but there is the risk that you end up being more expensive. You can't really target by audience interest or intent, right? You probably do have sections on your website, but you don't have a whole lot of data on what any interests are. Some publishers do try to do that, but they just don't have the scale to make it work out. Even if you had, 1 million readers a month, if you're trying to target for narrowly defined interests like you do have on Facebook, you end up with campaigns that at most can hit like maybe 500 people, 1,000 people, something like that. So they just don't have the scale to achieve that. And you can't really reach everyone in town. Not everybody reads the publication. It's not like Facebook where you can try and, you're still not hitting everyone there, but we don't have that complete coverage. So we do have some of our own weaknesses. Goals. All right, we've talked about our competitors and we know what their weaknesses are. We know what our strengths are. Let's talk about how much we actually need or want